Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. If you are sitting in a chair watching or listening, that's fantastic. The chair supports you. The chair model in your transformation also supports you. We're going to look at that today, the different chairs in our lives. It's the best I can do in explaining it. He's going to do a much better job. He's our professional of the year. He is a men's transformation coach, and he's back with us. Joshua Long is here. Welcome, Josh. How you doing?
Pleasure.
Now, you mentioned the chair model a while back, and we just skimmed the surface on it. What exactly is it? To me, it sounds like there's different chairs for different parts of our life.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if it was just for different parts of our life. But the sad thing is, like we've mentioned, most grown adults are actually still residing in their adolescent chair. So the chair model was founded by Michelle Chalfant. I had mentioned that the adult chair model, which is where I'm certified through as a master coach. And it really just breaks down the basic psychology of the developmental process of our minds as we completely from the time we're conceived and in the womb, clear through our life. The problem is the goal in our life, once we become online with, is to move into that adult chair. Sadly, like I mentioned, 80 to 90% of society is stuck in the adolescent chair. And prior to that adolescent chair, you have the child. So there's those three chairs. So you have the child, the adolescent, and the adult.
Is this essentially because of what we dealt with when we were younger, call it children or adolescents, those traumas? And when we say the word trauma, need to preface it by saying we're not talking about just major stuff. It could be just little things that went on, but that's got us stuck in each respective chair. And kind of the same thing when somebody says to you, you're acting like a child. You are.
Yeah, it's that adolescent. And I mean, you kind of, so even like the child chair. So the child chair, like I was mentioning, is from the time you're conceived. So even though you're not on Earth yet, you're still picking up all the energy from your mother that's carrying you. You know, maybe they're arguing with, with people, or, is the pregnancy even accepted? And that energy alone can kind of dictate, well, are you even accepted? So the child chair really is kind of out of our control as we come into this world because we don't have discernment as children. Wow. Everything, like you mentioned, the traumas, we're not even aware that it is a trauma because at this point, before the ego comes on, this is kind of where we're creating that roadmap. So everything that comes into us from that conceived to about 6 or 7-ish, all comes in as truth. We don't know what's good, what's bad. And so that's all stored into our subconscious beliefs. And then that's when we start moving into the adolescent. So the child chair is kind of out of our control. And this is, when we talk about the child chair, some things that kind of reside in, this is where our true emotions live, our true needs, our sense of curiosity, playfulness, our innocence, our trust, our sense of oneness, as a collective, all of that authentic, all the authenticity of who you are is in that child chair.
Good and bad.
Good and bad.
Yeah, because that could be, I'm trying to explain it. The core of who you are is in that chair, which is great. That's the authentic Josh. That's the authentic Steve. That's who we are. However, the stuff that we fear, we worry about, all of that is also sitting in that chair as well.
Well, no, not yet.
Oh.
So the fear, that comes in the adolescent. So that fear is ego development, then comes online around 6 or 7 until we're about 25-ish.
Okay. When you said adolescent, my brain goes to a little bit older. It's like the child chair for me is like 0 to 7, and then maybe 7 to 14, call it the adolescent. Could you have a fear of abandonment from the child chair, and then carry that on, or could it even start at the adolescent chair?
Yeah, and then that's where like what happened, like we didn't know what was. So like say somebody was put up for adoption, a kid or put into the system of someone. They don't know while when they're existing in that child chair, they're not aware. They
Sure.
just on. But then once the ego comes on, now it's fearful. Now that fear of abandonment comes on. So now it's going to create, this is where we have the patterns in our life. Like we talked about procrastination, this could cause you to kind of be reserved. So a lot of kids that were kind of abandoned, maybe they're just quiet, reserved, not really outgoing. They've kind of shut themselves down, numbing your feelings. So that's where you're moving into the development of the adolescent. And it is from 7 to like 25-ish, but it does, and when you hear adolescent, you're thinking, like you said, 7 to 14. But it's
Hmm.
the development of the ego isn't really complete until about 25-ish.
I want to put the microscope on the fear aspect for just a moment and try to just get my mind around that. So that doesn't happen until roughly after age 7. The true fear hasn't really developed from these things.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
I
look
find
at
that hard to
all these
believe, but
little
I
kids.
don't dispute it. But wow,
I
wow.
mean, look at all these little kids. Like they're such like we always say like children. They're so brave. They have no fear. They're just
Mm,
do it. They try because there's not a filter yet. The ego hasn't came on to say, don't do this because this will happen. And that's the ego. And then that's where the ego really is great, you're not going to say like, hey, like go jump off this bridge with before you process through, once your ego's on. And so that's keeping you really safe. But where it's wrong is it's trying to keep you safe from things that don't even exist anymore in our life.
mm.
So like
For
that.
example, let's go there. So that don't exist. Would that mean that something that took place when you were much younger, you didn't have a fear? Now you get into the adolescent chair, your subconscious goes back to when you were 4, something happened. Now you process it in a different way, and fear is now connected to it from the adolescent chair.
Absolutely. You got it.
Wow.
Process. So indicators that you're in like your adolescent chair, just for example, is you live with a lot of shame. And this for men, a lot of men live with a lot of shame. I mean, I think shame across the board, but men deal with it a lot more. I would say it's hard for you to apologize or forgive. You're a victim to everything. You're living in the past and future. We're all guilty of that. That's ego. You're not present because that presence is adult chair. So all of your rage, you're really reactive. All of those things are indicators that you're living in your adolescent chair. And like I said, some of the parts that show up is like that procrastination, being a fixer, codependency, narcissism. Those are all of the behaviors that show up to prevent you from feeling that pain as that inner child once did.
So are you saying that we do these things so we don't feel the pain?
Exactly. Yep. Trying to
Let
avoid it as much as possible.
let's look at that even closer. So we we become the fixer, we become codependent, we have shame. Um, all of the things that you just mentioned is a mechanism through the adolescent chair and the ego to deflect feeling what we don't want to feel based on the child chair.
Yep. The ego is protecting the child.
Let's
That's
talk about the ego. Let's
yeah.
talk about the ego because it gets a bad rap. You say the word ego instantly most people say, oh, inflated head, full of themselves, got a big ego. Well, but that it's not what we're necessarily what we're talking about. How do you define the ego?
The ego is literally, like you said, society looks at it kind of as that toxic masculine, that arrogant, cocky, rude, obnoxious, thinks he's better than everybody, selfish. We kind of put it in that box.
Yep.
But, and we mentioned on the last episode, it is just as much the one that you say is so nice, will do anything for everybody. The one that will always be there for you when you need them. Being a perfectionist, like I mentioned, we're all guilty of kind of like waiting the last minute. Being a procrastinator, all of that, like self-sabotaging, because all of those things are the ego's protective. So it doesn't necessarily show up in a negative way. Negativity or egoic protective patterns can show up what I call with a pretty bow on it, you know?
Gosh, will you please stop explaining me?
Right. Exactly.
That's what
Well, this
I,
is what's so miraculous. Well, this is all of us, 80 to 90% of us.
well, let me say that you described the old me.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
And even in that description, the perfectionism thing in my office right there is a newspaper clipping on the wall. 17 years old. I wanted to draw cartoons, almost became a syndicated cartoonist very young, pivoted to radio at the same time, stayed in that, till now. And the local library did a display of my cartoons. And then the newspaper did a, story on me when I was 17. And there's a quote in there that says, I am a perfectionist, blah, 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 blah. And yes, I was for decades until I realized, stop what you're doing. It doesn't support you. It's almost as if it's a deflection of trying to avoid things by he's perfect. He's always trying to be perfect. No, it's so doesn't support us. That's just one piece of, in learning this, the child chair, the adolescent chair, I saw myself sitting in them. I've got myself out of them in many regards. Of course, I wonder, is it possible to have half your body in the chair, as you do the work? And will you always be in one of those chairs to some degree?
To some degree, absolutely. I think that's like, so that being stuck in that adolescent is in a state of unconsciousness and just reactivity, and those behavior patterns are just running your life.
Yeah.
And this is kind of when if you're someone that feels like I'm stuck in my life or stuck with like a certain aspect of your life, it's because you're just running through the same thing. You're not actually moving into your adult and taking control of what you can control that's within you, instead of trying to control everything outside of you. So once you move into the adult, you'll know when you're in your, like, I can now say, like, if someone cuts me off, like on the highway, like, and I get frustrated and I might honk my horn, I'm like, oh, and in that moment, I can catch myself. I'm like, Josh, that's your adolescent. What would you do as an adult? I would have compassion and I would have love and I would practice. It's an opportunity for me to practice my patience and move back into that energy and say, you know what? I send that person love. I'm not, because that's another thing. When you're in the adolescent, you're making up what I call stories and assumptions in your head, because that ego wants to keep child comfortable. And so it makes up a whole story about something you really have no clue about. So like somebody like cutting you off in traffic, they could be in an emergency, and someone relative could be in the hospital.
Sure.
You never know what it is, but we just assume, because we're victim in the adolescent chair, we're always a victim. So it's like we just project out on like they're a problem or make up a story because it gives me comfort if I know the story. But once you move into the adult lives in fact and truth. That's it. There's no stories and assumptions. Fact and truth is, this person cut me off. I'm still going to get to where I need to go. That's it. There's no more that needs to be known.
Interesting.
Not your problem. You can't control them, but you can control your ego in that adolescent. And I can feel the trigger, but I'm gonna practice my patience now. And so you will always teeter back and forth. You can reside predominantly in your adult, but you'll always have slip ups where that ego does come back online for sure.
When you catch yourself, and I call it in my mind from just the media world, stop and rewind, like that moment somebody cuts you off, stop and rewind. It's like hit the stop and rewind and go back and then pick up from that point forward. Okay. Nobody got hurt. Maybe they were having a medical emergency. Maybe they're working 5 jobs to support their family and they just, they need more sleep. Honest mistake, whatever it might be. It's over and done. Move on. It's interesting. And I believe all of us seeing the ego for something totally different. The ego is it's like your subconscious. It wants to protect you. It cares about you, but it doesn't know right from wrong. It's pretty stupid.
Yeah,
in
it
some
doesn't know right
regards.
from wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Because it's stuck in the past
It's stuck in the past.
or
Yeah.
the future, it's
Hmm.
not actually here. Because that's
You
Go
said
ahead.
something before, being in the present. And I feel that was my journey game changer in the last 3.5 years. And I don't know if I shared this with you, but I met somebody, brief period of time. We had fun together or whatever. First thing was said, why do you not live in the present? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you're always in the past, always in the future. I don't know what you're talking about. I let a week or two go by, and then and I still see it years later. Yesterday, my day was pretty much in the present. It changed. There was, some plans, those plans changed, and I lived in the present. And for the most of it, it was like a great day. It was just like, I'm living at this very moment here. I'm not thinking about the other stuff out there. That was my aha moment among many in the last few years. What was yours?
My aha moment.
Yeah, for all of this, your first wake up to
Kind of
we
like when it all clicked, or kind of when I woke up.
give me both.
Woke up was just what I call an ego death. Just kind of an imbalance. I kind of stick away from the word toxic, because I like
Negative.
energy. Just kind of imbalanced, and we can regain balance. But mine ended kind of just in a ego death of like taking on relationship where I just was a people pleaser, codependent. They were a project for me and I had to fix it. But when I had nothing to fix and they denied my fixing, my ego ran out of like what to do. And that's kind of just the low moment that I hit, that I woke up. Now, it really didn't hit me living the lifestyle, because I did a year of my own personal healing based off the adult chair and following Michelle Chalfant. And then she launched this certification. And so after I went through my first program, which was 6 months, I would say that's when it really set in, because I wasn't just now in the world on my own. I was witnessing other, 50 other life coaches that were on this journey. I had got to meet Michelle, and you get to experience presence and you get to experience vulnerability within everybody, and have that permission to just be free. I would say after that is when it really hit me, and I really learned because time slowed down for me, because I became so present. I wasn't pulling myself into the future anymore. It felt like the longest year of my life, because I was so present and I was so in tune with my body, and what was happening around me and what I could actually control within. And it was that was kind of like that enlightenment, and where like if you just stay present and keep that positive mindset and remind yourself, even when that ego wants to come on, that I am safe in this moment. There is no threat. I am safe in this moment. It's a mantra I always say to myself. You really get blessed. You get so blessed when you don't react to life. And if you take everything on, that's kind of where I was. Life's happening for me. And all of these things coming at me are lessons for me to just grow. Because once you're through that shame and that pride, I always tell my clients, healing is actually fun. It's the pride and the shame that makes it feel so bad. But once you're through and you can start taking on things and looking at yourself and apologizing and having compassion, you really know that you've done some work. And I think that's when I really knew.
What a great feeling that is.
It really is. Yeah. Which
And
is why
part of
the world. Because I
the
think
shame
everybody deserves this.
It's got to be the shame's also defining your boundaries and your terms where you feel guilty as well. I experience it. I'm fully transparent. I experienced it over the weekend, making plans with a family member. Uh, and this is the plan based on other people. This is what we're going to do. And this person was just, just like kind of all over the place. Like, I'm not really sure if I'm going. I don't know what time it's going to be. I'm running 15 minutes late. Da, 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 da. And I was like, this is the plan. This is what everybody decided on. And this is the way it's going to be. And they weren't happy. They were like, what? I thought we were going to hang longer. No, no, it's cutoff time.
This was the plan.
This is the plan. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And it's one of the first times in the situation where I just step, this is what's happening. And the other person, how you approach this. You weren't even sure you were coming in the first place. It was already decided. It hurt for me to do that. But it was like, I'm leaving now. We're done. We had our day and that's it. If you wanted to do something longer, you should have said it and we would have. And that's it. That's the plan. Though, even in the last couple of months, call it 2, defining your terms has come up for me a lot. Call it boundaries. And I believe that's probably one of the 5 most important things, even here we're talking about, and even getting out of the adolescent chair. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Boundaries. I mean, that's good. Boundaries are kind of the beginning phase. Well, for one side of, we'll say that more that we haven't got into this yet, but core feminine energies, they're very outward, give, everything outside of themselves. So boundaries is one of the very first steps that you will take. Before you have to learn your boundaries, learn who you are. What do you want? What do you not want? And it is a process of even learning your own boundaries, but then applying them, because once you start applying them, like you said, walks right beside guilt.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
You have to learn, because that's you really stepping in to who you are, and you're finally teaching people how you want to be treated. So we hear a lot in this journey, you're going to lose a lot of people in your life that you've always had because you were a benefit to them. And once you put yourself first, there's no need for you in their life, and they may fall off. And you have to be strong and know who you are and what you're worth, and face that guilt and not let it hold you back, because it's strong, but you can't take on their emotions. They're, like you said, whoever that was, you can now see they're in their adolescent chair. Now I feel sorry for them. I can have compassion for them and love them and send them great vibes, but I don't have to fix their problem.
And I know where it came from, because they're controlled by somebody else. And that's, here, there's another layer of challenge, but interestingly, layers, yes. Interestingly, you say that when you finally define your terms and then people look at you and say, well, they're not of value to me anymore, and they fall away, which is perfectly fine. That's not to say that you didn't create that as well. You created your value by always being there for them and bending over backwards or providing something or whatever it might be. They treated you the way you asked to be treated. In that way, you're a different you then at this point. And if they fall apart away, that's okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the whole it takes 2,
Yeah.
We have to take some of that blame. But if I want to eat pizza for the last 5 years of my life, and tomorrow I decide I don't want to eat pizza anymore, I have that right. And it's that same way with, like, I used to be the type of person who just like, friends come over, you can go in my bedroom, you can do this. But now it's like, no, that's my personal space, my energy. Now, like, you may have been allowed to be in my bedroom our whole friendship, but tomorrow I have a boundary. When you come visit, I don't want anybody in my bedroom. Yep. That's new me, and I'm going to step into that now, just as the people that really love you. Because I always say boundaries are the best way to find out who's good for you, who's in your life, because they'll honor your boundaries.
Sure. And they'll respect that maybe things have changed a little bit. You're on a journey. We all change, they say it's like every 5 years or less. Fine. We're out of time. Final question. Short answer, because we're out of time. did you speak to yourself in your child chair, meaning sitting from the adult chair? Have you ever turned around to the child chair and had a conversation with yourself?
Absolutely. So funny thing is, I actually put my icon for like my Apple text messaging as like a picture of me as a little boy. And so when I want to speak to my child, I text myself, and it comes through as like a response. So I'll respond from my child, my adult, my child, my adult. So yes, that's absolutely part of the practice.
As ridiculous and cheesy as that may sound to some, it's genius.
Genius. It is. It separates the two energies too.
It really is. And I you know what? I'm bored with my avatar icon, whatever it is. I think I'm going to find my kid pic and put it up there.
Let me know how it goes.
It's actually kind of funny in a way when you think about it. Interestingly, I could use my son, who's now older. We looked exactly like each other. I even did a side by side, and you can't tell us apart. It's freaky. It's like it's weird. Fantastic talking with you today. I love how you laser it, and you're crystal clear on all of this and make it very easy to understand. You know, the chair analogy, some may think it's kind of goofy, but it's so spot on and fantastic. Somebody's looking to get out of the chair. or at least remove one cheek from the chair.
Yeah.
How do we do that, especially men looking for a transformation, connecting with you?
Best way, www.joshualongcoaching.com, JOSHUA long LONG coaching.com, or on all social media platforms you can find me at Coach Joshua Long. And you can also just subscribe. I'm actually launching a course on the inner child, connecting it with energy, mind, body, soul. So just subscribe on my website if you're interested, to the mailing list. And then when I launch that, I'll send that out to everybody so they're informed as well.
Amazing. And by the way, the reason I asked that question about talking to yourself in the child chair, I did hypnotherapy a couple of years ago. And through that, I did address myself younger. Never forget it. I will never forget it. So impactful. And that was just one time. Imagine doing it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Super cool. Thank you so much for today. And definitely looking forward next time we talk.
Thanks, Steve. Have a great day.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.